Lovely, lovely start. What is up, ladies and gentlemen? We are back with another episode of Puckin Around here on the Reben Preview Sports Network. As always, I am your host, Noah Dauber, representing the poor, fumbling Pittsburgh Penguins, joined by my co-host and buddy Brady Campbell, representing his poor, fumbling New York Islanders. How are you doing tonight, my friend?
I'm doing pretty well. What a playoffs this has been. Of course, it's been a few weeks. I know. Well, mainly me. I've been a little busy, but um, just the excitement level throughout each and every round has been upped. I feel like so much, and the conference finals absolutely delivered in every way possible. And now excited for an exciting Stanley Cup final, and I feel like the first in several years where I don't really have much of a rooting interest as well. I feel like the last few years I always preferred one team to win, but this one I like both teams a lot, and overall I'm really excited for it.
Yeah, man, it's gonna be interesting. You're gonna either see Connor McDavid win his first cup, or see the Florida Panthers win their first cup. Both teams have major cup droughts as well, which we're gonna talk about a little bit later. Ray Leo coming in saying, "What's up, boys? What's up, Rays? What's up, Ray?" But yeah, we got a lot to talk about tonight. We got a guest coming on as well to talk about the Rangers, and we're gonna talk about the Stanley Cup Finals. But before we get into that, let's go ahead and talk about the conference finals very briefly. We'll start with the Western Conference Finals, which the Oilers did win in 6 games. Go ahead and put our predictions up real quick here. I got the graphic. So, by the way, as I put this up, I got to say, I fucked up this graphic. We actually both picked Dallas in 6, but I put for Brady that he had Edmonton in 6, which that would have actually been
You,
correct.
you didn't have to tell them that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, got to be honest, man. But
I honestly forgot about that too. Yeah.
yeah, I did too. But it was an interesting series. At the first 3 games, I thought it'd be more of the same. I mean, Dallas, was really just firing on all cylinders first couple games. But then Edmonton came back with a convincing Game 4 win, and then I was kind of surprised last 2 games that Dallas's offense kind of just went cold a bit. I mean, they peppered Stuart Skinner in Game 6, but 34 shots, they only scored 1 goal, and then Jake Ottinger chose an absolutely terrible time to have an off game because Edmonton only had 10 shots in Game 6, but they scored 2 goals, and that was the difference in that one. Players to watch that we chose. Let me go ahead and remove this banner real quick. So I went with Connor McDavid, which I mean, pretty safe pick. He had 10 points, I think, in the series, 3 goals as well. And then you went with Evan Bouchard, who was second leading scorer, 6 assists, 7 points in 6 games. Pretty good ones there. You went with Jake Ottinger. He was definitely a player to watch, but not really for the right reason. 901 save percentage. Game 6 stinker did not go his way as well. And then Jason Robertson, let me see here, 4 points in 6 games, 3 goals. Not the best. Jamie Benn was Dallas's leading scorer in this series. Brady, what were just some of your general thoughts on this series? Because I definitely think Edmonton was the underdog in this one, but they got it done, going to their first Stanley Cup final since 2006, which they lost, and trying to become the first Canadian team since 1993 to win a Stanley Cup.
Yeah, I agree with you. They got off to a great start, taking game 1 on the road too. That was a really important one. And then of course they lost the next two, and Robertson got that hat trick to put Dallas up 2 games to 1. And obviously the series is far from over, but I did kind of agree with you that it kind of was starting to feel like the same old playoff Oilers again. That they just even with all this top talent would kind of fall short to usually often a better team, and in this case, possibly. But once game 4, started, they just completely turned it around. They got some timely goals, and really throughout those last 3 wins, especially the last few, especially the last one when he faced 34 shots. Stuart Skinner too. We usually make fun of the Oilers goaltending, and rightfully so, but he played out of his mind in that last one as well. And I was watching that, and I could not believe that. It felt like a lot of those games you've seen in the regular season too. The tight games, and the team that outshoots the other ends up losing, and they just cannot find the back of the net. Often outstanding goaltending performance, and Stuart Skinner is one of the last guys in the playoffs that I'd probably expect that from, but he played great. And of course, McDavid, as you mentioned, absolutely came through when he had to. And I feel like the whole team really stepped up. I mean, I feel like the bottom six kind of did their role as well. And Zach Hyman and Leon Draisaitl, of course, had a great series too. And it just, for Dallas, I feel like, we'll get into the East in a little bit, and I feel like the top of the West might have been a little bit more tightly contested with more teams, but I feel like their season felt a little bit like the Rangers, where they got as far as they did, and then they also had a series lead, and they had got a hat trick too. They were feeling good about themselves kind of at the midway point of the series from Jason Robertson, and then they kind of fell flat on their face to some extent. And where the Oilers, like in Game 6, only scored 2 goals on 10 shots, the Stars, outplayed the Oilers for a decent amount of some of these games and just could not find the back of the net. But that's hockey for you, and congratulations to the Oilers. I'm really excited to see McDavid, Draisaitl, these guys finally in the Cup final. But yeah, it wasn't looking great kind of early on in that series, but that's why it's a best of 7. These teams can kind of flip the switch just like that.
Yeah, I think with the Oilers, it was kind of always a matter of when they would get to the finals, not if. And when you look at the West this year, I mean, there were some very good teams, but I don't think it was like most years to where you see a clear contender. Like usually I'd say it's Colorado, but this year they weren't quite as good. They did get past the Jets, but then ended up losing to Dallas, obviously in round 2. Vancouver, kind of overachieved, I think, most of the season, and they did have a respectable showing, but ended up, falling behind in that Game 7, weren't able to overcome that. Vegas, they underachieved most of the regular season, second wild card or whatever it was. Decent playoff showing, but once again, ended up coming short. So, I do think there was a good opportunity for Edmonton here. I am surprised that they did beat Dallas. I thought Dallas, would get it done. But, McDavid went off. Like you said, Draisaitl as the number 2 guy. Even though, funny enough, 4 points in 6 games, so for Dallas, you take that from Draisaitl. But in the end, it didn't really matter because Stuart Skinner, he's the guy that's always singled out, and rightfully so, I think, because that's been the story for the Oilers. As long as I can remember, they're basically Toronto West version with how their teams are usually constructed. But fair enough. Last 2 games, he did a good job. Dallas just couldn't really beat him, and Edmonton just got enough offense after exploding in Game 4. So a good result for them. I think they're going to have a really tough finals. I mean, their last 2 rounds have been brutal, getting through Vancouver and Dallas, and now you got to face Florida as well. It's not been an easy road for them, but we'll get to the finals predictions a little bit later. A couple comments coming in. Tom saying Facebook blows. That it does. Jacob Winter saying go Wings. Brady, where is that Florida Panthers hat? Do you actually have a Florida hat?
I do. I could grab it. It's right here. One second.
Oh, all right. Well, while you do that, I'll go ahead and transition to the next topic, the Eastern Conference Finals. After a nice game-winning goal by former Ranger Vladimir Tarasenko, Panthers win Game 6 to beat those New York Rangers, advance to their second straight Stanley Cup Finals appearance. Obviously, they lost in 5 to Vegas last year, lost like 9-3 in the elimination game. Was not as good of a series as most were hoping for. Looking to win their first Stanley Cup. As we, look at this series, Brady, this was another one. This is interesting. I mean, the Rangers in these overtime games, it's kind of nuts. There were 3 straight overtime games in this series. Rangers won the first 2 to go up 2-1 in the series, and then Florida rebounded in Game 4 to tie it up. And then the last 2 games, I don't know what to make of these games. These were such, first of all, I got to say, I've never seen back-to-back games where a player stick breaks in the final 2 minutes and the team that had the guy with the broken stick score a goal. But it happened. These games, score-wise, looked pretty close. Play-wise might not have been that close, but, they were a little nervy at the end. But the Rangers, weren't able to find those second goals that they needed to try and tie the game up and, maybe go into another overtime. Every game other than Game 1, was a 1-goal game. Game 1 was a 3-0 shutout for Bobrovsky. A couple storylines that stick out to me, and obviously we're going to talk about the series a little bit more, so I won't go too in-depth. Trocheck, I thought, was amazing for the Rangers. I liked what I saw from Lafreniere as well. I've always liked Lafreniere. Jacob Trouba, I mean, I got to be honest. In the whole time this guy's been the captain, the only two things I remember this guy doing good was throwing a helmet and when he injured Sidney Crosby in that playoff series. Other than that, it's just not been very good for him. Got to question the top guys as well. Probably expect a bit more from him. Igor was amazing. I think Igor was the main series. The main reason this series was even competitive. The other side, Sam Reinhart and Bennett, they were great. Verhaeghe was great. Kachuk, I think, did pretty good as well. Barkov, he's the man. But as we look at our predictions, I was 0 for 2. I actually picked the Rangers. Even though I don't like the Rangers, I picked the Rangers. It didn't end up working for me. You picked the Panthers. Now, you picked against the Rangers last series as well, and that ended up biting you in the butt. This one you were right, but you got the number of games wrong. Players to watch, Bobrovsky. I thought Bobrovsky was pretty good. Granted, don't think he had too difficult a job because Florida's defense was amazing. Rangers probably made his job easier than it should have been. Matthew Tkachuk had a good series. And we both picked Chris Kreider because, I mean, Kreider basically stole that Game 6 in Carolina. Just one of the most ridiculous hat tricks I've ever seen. In this series, he had 1 goal and 1 assist for 2 points in 6 games. So, I mean, a lot of Rangers, I think, had an off series in this one. So, Brady, what were some of your general reactions to this Eastern Conference Finals?
Yeah, I completely agree with basically everything you just said. I think a main catalyst of it for the Rangers was, their top 3 or so guys, as you mentioned, Panarin, Kreider, who we both picked for our player to watch, and Zibanejad. They were quiet for, just about the whole series. They had their moments, of course. Kreider got a big shorthanded goal in Game 5, even though the Florida came back. And then for Panarin, he finally decides to score with like a minute 40 left in the whole series. But I think that was a huge issue for them that really came back to bite them. I think if those guys were playing even, a little bit better production wise, the series, would have even felt a lot closer because there were some games that, Florida borderline dominated or at least were outplaying the Rangers. And then Igor Shesterkin, as you mentioned, what a series from him. He had his struggles a little bit at points in the regular season, but late in the regular season and into the playoffs, he's been a man on a mission. And I mean, credit to Florida too, because they've had to go through Vasilevsky, Swayman, and Shesterkin, 3 of the best goalies kind of in the East right now, and they were able to get it done. They got some really timely goals too, I feel like. And it was kind of a mirror image of the Western Conference. The team that won the series ended up winning every game but games 2 and 3. And the Rangers, I remember watching Game 4 too. It went into overtime, and I kind of just figured the Rangers would win because up to that point, I don't think they lost an overtime game in these playoffs. But I feel like that was kind of the turning point, that Reinhart goal. Even though the series was going back to the Garden, Game 3 too, the Panthers completely outshot the Rangers, and the Rangers stole that one in overtime. But I kind of could feel like if Florida can kind of stick to their game, I think they would end up winning the series, and they did. And obviously they were down in that Game 5, but once again, some timely third period goals. But yeah, as you were saying, it was kind of a bit of a weird series. We saw some things like the broken stick situations and all that we never really seen before. The goalies standing on their heads, especially Shesterkin. Bob made some big stops too, but as you mentioned, not quite as busy. And then as Tom just mentioned in the comments, Vladimir Tarasenko kind of the former Ranger. I'm not going to say Rangers legend, but he gets what ends up being the series deciding goal too. And it was arguably the series of the playoffs, maybe at least in the Eastern Conference. It didn't go the full 7, but every game with the exception, I guess, of Game 1 was tight. And even Game 1 was 1-0 up until late in that game. So I'm not a fan of either team. Obviously, I did have my rooting interest, though, and I was on the edge of my seat throughout that whole series, though.
Yeah, this was a tight series, man. Everyone was a nail biter. Like you said, I wasn't really neutral, but I didn't massively care who won. As a neutral, though, it was an entertaining series. If you're a Florida fan, which there's not many of. Let's be honest. You're on top of the moon, and if you're a Rangers fan, I mean, I guess you're kind of used to it at this point. Jacob says Florida in 6 for the Stanley Cup. Two more things I want to mention about the Rangers before we get our guest on here. Number one, something is wrong with your offense when Barca Goudreau is your second leading goal scorer for the series. That's not what you plan to happen. And number two, the Rangers trade, or I don't know if they're trade deadline, but they're close to it. Alex Winberg and Jack Roslovic combining for 2 points in the series. I know Winberg's goal was an overtime winner, but they could have definitely used another top-line winger at the deadline. Not that there were any available for a cheap price or anything, but regardless, we're going to go ahead and get a guest on here. He is a diehard Rangers fan, so old that he got to see the 1994 Stanley Cup win in action. Sportsbox co-host. He's also the host of BlueTruth, where he covers those New York Rangers. My buddy, Brian Attard, how are you doing tonight, my friend?
No, I'm 40. I'm not 100.
It's like that guy in the show last night, youngin'.
Yeah, I got somebody on the Blues like, you're a young fan, you don't really understand. I'm like, are you serious? Like, what do you think I am exactly? Like, okay, I'll take it, but like, no, but, it is what it is.
You feeling any better lately, or is it still no, not at all?
Yeah. Listen, this is an annual grieving process. I've been through it 29 times in a row. I am semi used to it, but I will equate it to if you know someone in your life who is of advanced age that is on the way out. You may know they're on the way out, but you're never really prepared for them to be on the way out. So when they leave, it hurts just the same. So listen, if you don't care, then it doesn't hurt, and I'd rather feel pain than nothing at all.
Nice 3 days grace.
You like that? Yeah,
great song. But
I want to see if you pick that reference up.
Hey man, one of the best eras of music for me. But
by the way, Brady, that banner bag looks a little dusty. You might want to clean it off.
I know. I was hoping to add to it a few years back, but
thank God.
Looks like I'm gonna have to wait a while.
Yeah, man. Yeah. If they won that Game 7, they would have won it all. But could be worse. He's a Mets fan. Poor Tom, man.
Oh yeah.
Mets are going to Met. They're in London right now, so
that way they can lose on both sides of the Atlantic.
Exactly, and it takes a lot to lose in multiple countries. But regardless, we're going to get into this real quick. Mm-hmm. So the Rangers, another decent run, but ended up coming short. They've had a lot of them since 2012. They've made 5 Eastern Conference Finals, I believe. Lost 4 of the 5, obviously, and then made that Stanley Cup Finals where they ended up coming short as well in a series that, let's be honest, was never really that close. LA was on another insane run that season. It looked like they were destined for it. They have the 13th longest Stanley Cup drought in the NHL. One of those will be removed because the Panthers and Oilers are both above them on that list. 29 years now going on. But, Brian, I want some of your reactions to this series loss, because obviously you watched all these games, very intently. We're keeping up with it, but we might not have, seen some of the things that you had. So, what were some of your, I guess, knee-jerk reactions at first, and maybe things that you thought about since then that you don't initially think about? And, of course, who do you think deserves the most blame? It's never just one person to blame, I think, but you got to pass the buck somewhere. So who do you blame for this?
I think there's a lot of sources of frustration, but you brought up the recent history of the team, right? And I talked about this last night on BlueTruth. The last 3 years, they haven't won, obviously, but you have a conference final, a first round, and a conference final, losing in all 3. You react emotionally differently in each of those situations, right? So you think back to 22 and the Lightning, right? Now, you remember this, Noah, because the Rangers beat the Penguins on their way there. It took a couple little mini miracles for them to get that far, right? So you came back 3-1 against Pittsburgh, which were their third string goalie. So, everything was fine for you there, right? You get through Carolina again in a 2-0 deficit. You come back that twice against their second string goalie. So when they ended up losing to Tampa, like, you lost to a better team and you kind of shouldn't have been there. So there was this kind of like, it's okay, little optimism, right? You're never happy to lose, but it's one of those things where you kind of weren't supposed to be there anyway. Last year losing the Devils, that was just pure anger, because that is a situation where you lost to a team that you were better than, that you had dead to rights, and you just let them back off the hook, to quote Dennis Green. This was more of, I think, just an acceptance, in that if you have functional eyesight, you saw that as the series went on, regardless of what was the cosmetic final score, the Rangers were not the better team in the series. So you don't like it, but you accept it because you lost to a better team. So for me, I know a lot of Rangers fans are blaming their defense, but cosmetically or not, you basically lost each of these games by 1 goal. So it bears to reason that maybe if you had a top 6 instead of a top 5 and a big wheel of rotation of who's going to play the wing on Mika's right side, that maybe you get 1 or 2 of those goals. And maybe we're not talking about this right now. So for me, again, I'm not gonna. I think it's kind of lazy to blame Mika, Kreider, and Panarin. I think that's just the knee-jerk reaction because you didn't get the goals they were supposed to get from them. Again, Florida's a good defensive team, so both teams play here. I think it was on Chris Drury because you have a team that on the upper end of the roster, time's not on your side. Time is ticking. And you chose to be, frankly, really conservative at the deadline, which to me says one of 2 things. Either A, you didn't think that there was a move to put them over the top, or you just weren't willing to do it. And in both of those examples, I don't think it's a good thing. So Jay Gensel, Pavel Buchnevich, I could go over the whole laundry list of people that were available. When you're this close to maybe the end of a contention window, I think you kind of have to push your chips into the middle. And if Pittsburgh wanted more from the Rangers for Gensel than Carolina, I think you have to do that. I think the fact that he went to the division rival that you had to go play. Imagine if they lost that series, which was really a much closer series than the series would indicate. Mm-hmm. Now you're saying, wow, not only did we lose, but we lost to the team that we let take the guy that was the belle of the ball that we could have gotten and we didn't. To me, Chris Drury was extremely passive at this deadline. I don't like any rationale for it. People are going to say, well, you got to keep your picks or you got to keep Brennan Othman. To me, I'm not thinking 4 years down the road because I don't think that they have that kind of time. So I would have been pushing chips in right now. So if I'm going to blame one person, for me, it's Chris Drury for what I thought was a very failed attempt at filling roster holes, which come to fruition, they didn't even fill whatsoever.
Another guy, too, that I just want to ask you about quick, we all saw Alexis Lafreniere kind of come into his own this season as, the top pick a few years back. But on the other side of that, Kaapo Kakko, I feel like, of course he was the number 2 overall pick the year prior. He hasn't really, panned out quite the same way that a lot of the Ranger fans and the team were hoping. What are your thoughts kind of on that, as he was also pretty quiet throughout this postseason?
I think his development, you can kind of see why the Rangers don't really do very well developing young players, because when these guys fall in your lap, even Laffy, who was supposed to be, I can't miss, it took him a while to kind of get going, right? So the problem with Kaapo is, again, you've been through 3 coaches now. His rookie year, Gerard Gallant thought it was, or David Quinn thought it was intelligent to put him on the 4th line. I just think that they've jerked this kid around way too much. He may never realize what he could have been here. He may need to trade somewhere else and just a spot in the top 6 and just let him run. There's 2 things here, right? So the Rangers didn't miss the pick because he was always going to be the pick, right? It's not one of these situations where they went and took Elias Anderson at 7 and it just was a dumb pick from the jump and everybody's like, what the hell are you doing? Everybody and their mother said this was a top 2 pick in that draft. So I don't blame them for that. The same way I don't blame the Flyers, who I cannot stand, for choosing Nolan Patrick 2nd overall, because that was the pick. Everyone said that was the pick. Everybody. That was unanimous, right? So I can't hold that against them. Kakko is an excellent defensive winger. I know that's not what you want at 2nd overall. That pick was made 6 years ago, 5 years ago. I think at this point, it is what it is. So either you work with what you have, and he would be a very cheap option for the third line. He's very, very good defensively. Put him against anybody. I don't worry about that. He may never again see those offensive numbers you thought he was going to get to. A lot of that might just be lack of development. I think they would listen to offers, but I don't think that they're in a rush to move him. I think if something came around that made sense to fill some other hole that they have or that they're about to create potentially, sure, because your window's not that long, right? So Again, would I be upset to have him back? No. Do I want to give him away? No. If it makes sense, sure. Everybody. Wayne Gretzky was traded. Anybody can get traded. So it's got to make sense for the team. It is disappointing because obviously it's a second overall pick and you think you're going to get some star. There have been second overall picks and first overall picks that never pan out at all. So again, it's gauging it against your expectation as far as was it successful or not. I just don't blame them for it. There's a lot of things I blame them for. That's not one of them.
Yeah, I agree with you, Brian. I think that's one, and you said it last night. I think you kind of described it well. That's one that everyone got wrong because, it was consensus. It was basically whoever went number one, you were going to get the other guy. It was like going to be either Hughes or Kakko. And I do think he's a great defensive guy, but offensively, obviously, it hasn't quite been there. So, a disappointing pick, but, I think the Rangers – first of all, I mean, they lucked into the luckiest first overall pick we probably ever seen that helped push the rebuild way forward. And we're starting to see that now, Lafreniere. I mean, Brian, I've always liked Lafreniere. I know a lot of people have, put that bust label on him as well in the past. I've always liked him. And, we've seen him get that more ice time this season. He's coming his own. He very well could be, your first line right wing next season and have a very good season. Kakko, I don't know. I think it's possible he comes back. I don't know if he'll ever be more than, kind of a third-line winger type of guy. Maybe he could be like a middle six guy on a worse team. I'm not too sure. I don't know if his course is run there. I do think he could be decent on a team as kind of like you said, a solid defensive guy. But I don't know, 6 years into his career, like you said, if he's ever going to get that kind of offensive boost that you're hoping for. But, it's possible. But yeah,
he's still 23, right?
Yeah.
Like we forget that, right? Like, I think what has happened generally in sport is the NFL draft has changed the way we view other leagues drafts. Like, we expect these guys to come in and compete right away, right? So, maybe he shouldn't have come up right away. But again, you're the New York Rangers. You have this second overall pick and you're trying to sell tickets because you're the New York Rangers and whatever. So he plays right away. Maybe that wasn't good for his development. It is what it is. You've now changed coaches on him twice, and he's always looking over his shoulder, right? Like if he was on a team like Anaheim or Buffalo, well, maybe not Buffalo, probably Buffalo. Like if he was just in a top 6 spot and just let go to do his thing and grow, like he probably flourishes. And David Quinn was on the Cam and Strick podcast a couple of years ago after he left the Rangers, and he said, those guys, I'm paraphrasing, those guys are going to be fine. The problem is, the Rangers had players on that team. Guys that normally go 1 and 2 overall end up on teams that are total ass. And they are given top 6 minutes in power play time immediately. And the crazy part about Laffy was at 5-on-5, the numbers were there, but the production in total wasn't because he wasn't getting power play time that guys like Tim Stützle were, right? So you kind of got to, go a little bit under the hood to kind of see those things. I don't disagree. I mean, would you like to see more? Sure. 100%, but it's not as if that many people below him have been, lighting the world on fire, and he was always going to be the pick. That was the easiest pick in the draft for me, right? Because the Devils had the decision of Hughes or Kakko, and the Rangers would take whatever was there. So the Devils made the pick for the Rangers, and I guess it kind of worked out in their favor.
Speaking of 5-on-5, this kind of transitions to the next thing I want to ask you. So the Carolina series was an interesting one because – like you said, there were a couple of coin flip games in there, which the Rangers ended up snagging. But it was kind of a weird one because even though the Rangers won the series, I personally thought that Carolina actually had the edge 5-on-5, and it was really decided on special teams. And obviously, Chris Kreider heroic, a couple of deflections in Game 6, and that was kind of a game the Rangers stole, and they win the series. And then in this series, we kind of see it again, except their power play goes cold. Their 5-on-5 is still struggling, and they have to rely on Igor to keep them in the game. And while every game was close, like you could see with how badly they were getting outshot that, they lost to a better team overall. And I agree with you that makes it less frustrating because if you lose to a team like the Devils, like that's a series they should have won. Whereas this one, it's kind of like if they just had a few more bounces here or there, if Chris Drury had, maybe traded for a guy like a Jake Gensel, to get that odd goal here and there, that could have made a difference in the series. It doesn't matter if you're a better team as long as you win and move on. And, that's all you got to worry about. So moving on, I want to talk to you about a guy that I thought was fantastic this year. I don't think he deserves any blame for this playoff series, and that is Peter Laviolette. Now, Laviolette is a guy that I'm going to be honest with you, Brian. When the Rangers hired him, I wasn't too sure about this. I understand why they moved on from Gallant. It was time to, go in a different direction. But Laviolette was the guy. He came from Washington. Washington, wasn't terrible, but obviously they weren't great either. And, we kind of see more of the same from them this year. But he has a respectable track record. I mean, I'll put up some of his stats. He's won a Stanley Cup back with Carolina in 2006. Made 2 more, lost with the Flyers, luckily. Lost against the Penguins, luckily. But, this guy, he's been in the league for a long time. So, what were just some of your main impressions from this, first year under Laviolette, both regular season, playoffs? What were the biggest differences you saw with this Rangers team compared to the Gallant ones?
Structure and actual coaching.
Mm-hmm.
Because the Gerard Gallant, and again, I full disclosure, I was an advocate for the hire. I thought it was the right hire at the time. Is Gallant's very hands-off, old school, give me your best type guy. You know what? That works for a period of time. And it worked to a point in the first year because the Rangers have these forwards that the chemistry is really good. But if you go back and you look at it now through the lens of now he's gone, there were the veterans and there were the kids. Like there was the kid line. That's because the kids couldn't play with the veterans without just deferring to them. Like it never worked. There was no instruction. There was no anything. But they worked well together because I guess they're just, the same age, same style. That's why that worked. Laviolette was questionable hire at the time because you thought they needed to go a different direction entirely, but they kind of did. Laviolette is very attention to detail. They ran systems, they make adjustments. It's not the same old, just keep throwing your guys out there. So of all the I am a huge fan of what he did in year one. There were actually practices, which was nice because there were optional skates under Gerard Gallant. So, they were competitive in practice and you saw them play better as a result, right? So I forget who it was, but there was in the playoffs, for example, you are what your habits are. You don't raise your game. You just fall back to and the Rangers' habits were phenomenal because they were actually practicing all year long versus just skating around. So I'm happy with the hire. He's more than what I have no desire for him to move on. My concern, and maybe it'll be alleviated a bit because they didn't go on and win, is that the guys on his coaching staff, like a Dan Hughes and a Michael Pekka, who could be considered for other jobs, maybe they won't be because staff was great. I mean, again, I don't have a lot of complaints, from the coaching side of things. The only thing I will say, I mean, look, you can always split hairs and things. I mean, the one mistake that's going to stand out, and you mentioned it, was the conference finals changed on that overtime goal. They didn't win after that. Like once that veil was pierced, like that was it. And their actual top line of Trocheck, Panarin, and Lafreniere didn't see the ice in overtime. Mika makes a bad pass. Wheeler makes a penalty he shouldn't take. Like these are not guys you should put out. I don't know why Wheeler's out there at all in overtime of a playoff game. His first game back in 4 months. That was questionable and it cost them the game. Nobody's perfect. Of the alternatives, I was a Joel Quenneville guy, but that obviously ships that was never going to sail. I'm fine with it. I think he can be the right guy. I have no complaints coaching wise about the hire or the job that he did.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of the coaching staff, I'm glad you mentioned that because I wanted to get your thoughts on the news about Benoit Allaire.
Very concerning. Yes.
Very concerning. Why do you think that is concerning? Do you think he had a massive role in kind of the development of Igor and these goaltenders? Because Rangers have always been known, as long as I've remembered, for their forwards and defense might not be as good, but you can always count on the guy between the pipes back there.
The goalie whisperer.
Yeah.
So I attribute a lot. Lundqvist will tell you, he was pivotal to his career, and again, when Igor came up under him, and I really think he may have just completely fixed Jonathan Quick last year. That's the kind of goalie coach that he is. Now, he's not leaving the organization. He's just stepping away from the day-to-day role. He still will be involved, but it is very concerning because, this team has been blessed with goaltending and not much else for pretty much my entire life. And until you see it and it's not affected by his lack of daily presence, fear of the unknown, right? You have that safety blanket that no matter what, we have this wonderful goalie coach other teams don't have and pay him whatever the hell he wants. There's no cap on coaching. It's going to be concerning to me until we get 10, 15 games and I don't see a drop-off. Mm-hmm. And listen, maybe if there is a drop-off, maybe he is a little more active. I don't know. Look, he's 65. He's earned it. Don't get me wrong. I have no ill will towards him, clearly. But being that he's been that integral to the whole thing, My concern is that if he's not there, what that ends up looking like. And again, until I know it's going to be okay, I assume that it's not.
Brady, a little question for you. Do you know the first NHL team that Peter Laviolette coached with in his career?
I believe that is my New York Islanders.
Correct.
I know he coached them at some point
He
when he was younger, of
He
course.
coached their first 2 seasons, and then the
Yes.
second year after he left the Islanders, he won a Stanley Cup. So
Look,
there you go.
Sounds about right.
Most guys get their start in the minors, so yeah.
Yeah, there you go. AHL
Well,
team.
basically at that time, yeah.
Couple comments. Tom says, I blame everyone from Igor, or but Igor. Everyone could have played better. And Dimitri says Brian's the best. Don't let his head get any bigger, man. It's already
Dimitri is a very loyal fan of BlueTruth. He actually, I gave him a shout out at the start of the show last night that he made a comment that he needed the therapy session with me, and that meant a lot to hear. It validates, the work that you do.
So one more question about Laviolette. I'm glad you mentioned Gallant because this kind of ties into my question. Like you said, you supported the Gallant hire at the time, but you also supported him going because this is a coach that we've seen over the course of his career, 3 years, and that's it pretty much. And that's exactly what happened with the Rangers. With Laviolette, he's had a couple shorter stints here and there, but for most of the time, pretty stable, 5-6 seasons, and then he's on to the next team. You don't have any problems with him after year one, but the Rangers are in a weird situation where they need to win now because the window is closed and their best players are getting on up there in age. There's a possibility they might be going into rebuild next 2 or 3 years. You never know. Laviolette, I think, is a coach that you want for a team that wants to win now. He's a solid, respectable coach. So it's very hard to ask this question and kind of come up with an answer. But what are your thoughts on the future for Laviolette the next few years? And how dependent do you think it is, obviously, on playoff success and the direction that the Rangers want to go, if you will?
I mean, listen, we could be talking in 12 months. I mean, if they don't have a good offseason and we have the same result, would it really surprise me if the coach and the GM are on the outside looking in? No, it's a results-oriented business, right? His contract, I think, is 4 years. It might have been 3, but it was 3 or 4, which really kind of coincided with really the usefulness of the top end of their roster. So, I mean, the timing of that made sense. Gerard Gallant normally was a 3-year guy. He lasted like 2 in New York, which was good on Drury for making that change. It doesn't make up for the fact your deadline sucked, but that's fine. I think that his effectiveness is on the same timeline as the teams, because I think you have a lot of questions you have to ask once really after this season, right? Because then you're in Panarin's final year, which is a big one. If Trouba's still around, you're in Trouba's final year, so you have money coming in. Kreider's deal will come up a year after that. Look, Igor needs a deal. We're probably going to talk about that, I'm sure. So there's a lot of flux with the roster. They are in win now. So he's a win now coach. Like, while I don't think John Tortorella was the right coach for the right time for the Flyers, he is more of he can be a builder. I don't know that Laviolette's a builder. I think he's a finisher. And if they don't finish, then what are you there for?
Right. And I understand why they let him go, but I think the problem with the Rangers is that they had a builder coach in Chris Knobloch, and now he's gone. So it's kind of like whenever they replace Laviolette, they're going to probably have to look outside the organization.
Listen, before we name a trophy in Chris Knobloch's honor, let's just remember that the Oilers have Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid. So it's
that is true.
I could probably do a decent job coaching that team, and I don't know anything, right? So again, like, I have no ill will. Good for him, right? It wasn't going to work out here for him, and the Rangers wanted to do right by him. That's why they let him go. It's no harm, no. I think he would struggle coaching a different team because you have a lot of talent on that team. That's finally coming together. Maybe he's the kind of coach that just stays the hell out of the way and lets elite talent do their thing. I don't know. I don't really know his coaching style. He's great. He was great in Hartford. He helped, but it's fine. The one Rangers game he coached during the pandemic, the Rangers won 9-0 over the Flyers. We should have seen that coming.
The only reason I bring that up, I agree with what you're saying about him. It's tough to see if he's the guy yet, but I do remember when the Rangers were looking for a coach. That was a guy a lot of your obviously you didn't want him, but I remember a lot of Rangers fans considering promoting internally. Don't know if it was the right, because like you said, you want a guy that comes in, finishes. The Rangers already had a core there, and Laviolette has clearly shown I think he can be that guy. Just came a little bit short. Zach Hyman. I don't.
That too. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Dimitri will probably agree with this. The problem with a lot of Rangers fans is like when they hear a name, they assume they're good, right? So we went through a long process talking about, could the Rangers have traded Brennan Othmann for Jake Gensel? Like, oh, you can't trade Brennan Othmann. He was the number one prospect. Okay. He was the number one prospect in a very weak prospect pool, right? So just because he's the Rangers' number one prospect, which he's not anymore, but just because he is, doesn't mean he's any good. It means he's just slightly better than who's below him, right? So again, to me, Othman's a middle six guy at a ceiling. I don't really draft first round to do that. Gabe Perreault's going to be a top line winger, and that's great. Love that idea. Guys are expendable. People get too enamored with, let's think 5-6 years down the road. We could all be dead by then. You can't think like that. Not when your team's at this juncture of the cycle and generally the age of the top end.
Before we get into the contract elephant in the room, which you've already mentioned, I want to talk about guys that are up this offseason.
Mm-hmm.
So go ahead and put this up. So I've separated by RFA and UFA. So RFAs, we got Kako, who we kind of already talked about a little bit, Ryan Lindgren and Braden Schneider. And UFAs, you got the 2 trade deadline acquisitions. Blake Wheeler, who I've actually heard rumblings about potentially retiring, Eric Gustafson, and Chad Ruedel. And can I just say, as a guy who has formerly had Chad Ruedel on my team, I'm not surprised he's a UFA. But regardless, what are some names here that kind of stick out to you, Brian? And what kind of deals are you looking for with these guys?
So the only one of the UFAs that has a literally a chance at all to come back would be Gustafson on a short-term deal, and I mean 1 year. I think he's probably going to want 2 somewhere. Thanks for playing. Ruedel was depth. Best luck in your future endeavors. Blake Wheeler is probably going to retire, even if you don't got to go home, but you got to get the hell up out of here. So he's gone. Roslovic and Wenberg are just going to piss me off every time I see them, so they can go right away. So UFAs to me are all gone for the most part, right? Your RFAs, look, Braden Schneider is the second best right-handed defenseman on this team. I think that he has a great future. I was not a fan of the draft because they needed a center. Okay, I'm wrong all the time, so that's great. Braden Schneider is going to be a second pair right defenseman moving forward. Kako, we talked a little bit about. Again, they're not going to let him go. He's not going to walk away for nothing. He'll be qualified and everything else. Either be on the team or he's going to be traded. I think there's probably equal chance to both of those. The problem that I have with Ryan Lindgren is that Ryan Lindgren's style of play is not conducive to a very long career. He has all the vibes in the world of Dan Girardi 2.0, and that scares the hell out of me. That is not someone who I want to commit money to for long term, because then you can't get out of it. Yeah. So we're going to get to this topic, but I think the way the timeline is going to go, the Rangers are going to need use of a second buyout window. They have 2 players, which we're going to talk about, that have modified no trade clauses where they have 15 teams they don't want to go to. You don't get those lists until July 1st, which is after your first buyout window, which is pre-free agency, right? So the Rangers kind of don't know with 2 players if they need to buy them out or not. As long as you get arbitration on one player, you get a second buyout window afterwards. I think that they need that flexibility. So here's 2 reasons why that's one reason why it helps, right? But with Lindgren, it's not as if an ARB award is going to be that high. The ARB awards go to the offensive defenseman, right? It's the stats that you put up. So they may be able to be saved from themselves by getting a 1 to 2 year arbitration elected contract, which isn't that great. And then you take him for 2 years and then figure it out afterwards. I'd much rather do that than give this guy 6 years, because he's not going to get to 6 years. I mean, he's a heart and soul guy. He's a warrior. So was Dan Girardi. Dan Girardi got bought out halfway through his contract because it wasn't working out. You can't pay that kind of guy that kind of money. You need offensive production. They're the ones that generally get paid. So for me, Kako's going to sign or get traded. I would take Lindgren to arbitration. Schneider's a no-brainer. Sign that guy. The UFAs can all. I couldn't care less.
Brady, any thoughts on any of these guys?
Yeah, I agree with Brian. Especially, I feel like on Lindgren. Obviously, I don't watch the Rangers as closely, but I feel like he gets hurt at least 2 to 3 times a season, and he bounces back surprisingly quickly. But every time you see him, he's got bruises on his face, and he's. I respect the style of play that he brings, but as you mentioned, it's not great for a long career or anything like that. I agree with Schneider too. From what I've seen, I think he's a pretty solid defenseman. He's still young too, so he's learning the game. But I think he fits in pretty nicely as kind of a middle pairing right-handed defenseman. And yeah, I mean, Roslovic and Wenberg are really the only guys where I'd see, maybe, but I don't think that'd be like anything crazy for bringing back UFAs per se. On like any major contracts. They did okay, but obviously the production, I think they were hoping for a bit better, especially in the postseason. And then of course we talked about Kakko as well. I think this will be an interesting offseason for the Rangers with obviously how close they got, and with the off seasons coming up down the line too, and where they're at, as being one of the basically top teams in the NHL. I think, it's not necessarily really any of their stars per se on the market this offseason, but, this offseason will absolutely play a role down the line for them.
I think a lot gets made of the no movement clauses for certain people. Here's my take on that, right? I don't think the no moves have been a reason why a player hasn't gotten traded, because either A, you don't want to trade them, like Panarin and like Kreider, in my opinion, or their contract says you can't, like Mika Zibanejad, right? Like, no one would sign Mika to a 6-year, $8.5 million a year deal as a free agent, right? That wouldn't happen. So why would they trade for that contract? So it's not as if the clause was the reason they weren't traded. It's either because you don't want to, or you just, no one wants them. But people get enamored with, oh, there's a no move clause. That's why they're not. It takes two to tango, right? So, again, I think people make too much of that. You don't get signed. You don't sign big name guys without these sorts of clauses, because they don't want to get sent to Calgary without them saying okay.
Moving on to after next season. So besides the elephant in the room, we're going to talk about other guys first with this one. So once again, RFAs and UFAs. Key RFAs, I think the one that obviously sticks out to me is Lafreniere. Definitely a guy you want to get locked up long term. Adam Edstrom as well, Will Cooley, Matt Brimpy, Keandre Miller, and Zach Jones. And the UFAs, Jimmy Vesey and John Fickquick. Any thoughts on these guys? Obviously, this is a year away, Brian, but I mean, some key names on this list.
Sure. So they can extend Lafreniere and Shesterkin as of July 1st. If I were the Rangers, I would offer Lafreniere an 8-year deal. And if I were Lafreniere, I wouldn't take it, because I feel as though his value would be higher 12 months from now. So he's going to be someone they lock up. And again, it's a good problem to have. I mean, the kid had a great year, finally had coaching and a set spot in the lineup. There was all this concern that he couldn't play right wing. Well, apparently he couldn't play right wing under an ass clown of a head coach, because he played right wing just fine under Peter Laviolette. They're looking to get a little bigger. So Edstrom being like 6'8" is great for that. Same with Rempe. Again, I think. So Ranger fans get enamored with a guy like Matt Rempe because he fought somebody. I was in the game against Philadelphia in Philly when he fought LePerriere or whatever, and I have a great video of it. Had over 1 million views on BlueTruth. But Ranger fans sometimes like this, just, oh, he's going to go hit some. No, I mean, the kid actually can play a little bit. He's got to be nurtured, but he can be a fourth line guy with size. So I'm fine with that. They're going to sign Shesterkin early July, and it's going to be very expensive, and people are going to say it's too much money. But I think, as I said last night, if you compare it as a percentage of cap, $12 million a year, which is the rumored number, which it might not be 12, but let's just say that it is. That is a lower percentage of cap than Henrik Lundqvist got, right? Because Henrik Lundqvist, if he got the average of what Henrik got as a percentage of the cap when the deal is signed, it's 12.4. And I polled Rangers fans. Is he the best goalie in the league? Overwhelming it was yes. Is there bias? Probably. But I think most people would say he's, if not the best, he's in that stratosphere. So of course it would make sense for him to get paid that kind of money. The highest paid goalie in the league right now is still Carey Price at 10.5. Bobrovsky's making 10. Call it 10.5. I don't know why, if I'm Igor Shesterkin, why I won't sign a piece of paper for less than 11, because I need that DAP. I need to know I am the highest paid player at my position, because you know what? Without me, you're not a playoff team. And he knows it, and his agent knows it. He was asked in breakup day about the contract, and he said in perfect English, I don't speak English. So, again, like, pay me my money in cash. Like, it's coming, and he's worth it. I mean, that's Connor McDavid scores goals. Igor Shesterkin stops them. A stopped goal. Ben Franklin said, "A penny saved, a penny earned." Well, a goal you don't let in is one less left to score the other way. So, call it what it is. If it's 12, it's 12. What are you going to do? You're going to say no?
Mm-hmm.
But he also wants to win. So I think that's where the 11 might be legit.
Right. Yeah. I think he might take a little bit lower. Like you said, he does seem like a loyal guy, and he doesn't want to completely bend the team over, although he could, because like you said, he has all the leverage. He's, in my opinion, their best player. Sure. He's the main reason they got that far. He's going to, because as an extension, it goes into effect next season when the cap has raised to, I think, $92 million or something like that.
Yep.
And also, I got to mention this for you, very high state tax in New York.
We have that discussion, then we'll be here for 3 hours. Don't take me down that road.
No discussion. Just wanted to briefly mention it. But,
basic statement. It is the opinion of Brian Attard that salary cap should be adjusted for state taxes. Different show. Move on.
Last topic before we kind of start talking about your off-season predictions / expectations. You're not a massive fan of how Jacob Trouba has been playing lately, to say the least. In fact, you have repeatedly requested he be launched into the sun. Verbatim quote from you. Mm-hmm. Fans are now speculating about the future of the blue line. I asked you this earlier because, I wasn't quite sure exactly what the Rangers would be looking for defensive-wise. I've heard, some say they need to get another big guy in there because, they've been beaten up a bit physically in some of these series. What potential free agent defensemen and potential trades kind of stand out to you for the Rangers?
It depends who's not there, right? Because I think Zach Jones can be an everyday defenseman. If Lindgren's there, then your left side's good. If you get rid of Trouba, you need somebody on that right side. So for me, when you start looking at some of the free agents, you want somebody with a little bit of size, a little bit more of a banger. You have Zach Jones. Zach Jones is not Adam Fox. Zach Jones plays like Adam Fox in that he can be a power play quarterback, plays that role very well. So you have, and Miller's a talented offensive kid, right? So he used to play forward. So you have three guys there that are offensively inclined. Lindgren is not, Schneider is not. So you start looking at that right-handed defenseman potentially on the bottom pair, which is currently held down by someone who should be launched into the sun. You look at a Jalen Chatfield from Carolina, who they're going through changes this offseason. He may be looking for greener pastures. Tyler Myers isn't really that good. Big, tall guy, though, like a redwood. And I think if they're looking for that size back there, you can get a veteran guy on a short-term deal. Again, my concern is that we get Patrick Nemeth 2.0, and that's a problem. But I think if you look for a guy with some size that can hit, that can, not necessarily crease clear, but that profile, that would be someone that I would be very interested in. And I wouldn't rule out some kind of trade with the Vegas Golden Knights, possibly involving Ryan Lindgren, simply because they got a lot of those kind of defensemen back there, and they have now cap issues because they keep going all in every year, which I respect the hell out of. Wouldn't be surprised if the Rangers and Knights are talking. And also, well, let me not get to, I think we're getting into a topic. I'll save that.
All right. I'm glad you mentioned Patrick Nemeth because I did want to say I think you could sign a guy like a Patrick Nemeth for 10% of Trouba's contract, and he'd probably give you similar production with the way he's been playing lately. So I do remember as well from our series a few years ago, Patrick Nemeth was another guy you requested to be launched into the sun.
And then he was.
Yeah. But moving on to the other free agent major need. We've seen this, kind of merry-go-round rotation trying to find that first-line guy. It's not good when, guys like Alex Winberg and Jack Roslovich are, being slotted as top forwards. I think they're good depth guys, but when you're putting them on top lines, that's an issue. So notable free agents, you got Sam Reinhart of those Florida Panthers, Jonathan Marchessault, who I know you're a big fan of, Brian. Tyler Toffoli, Tarasenko, who was on the team last year, obviously. David Perron, Patrick Kane, who was also on the team last year. And Daniel Sprong, Jake DeBrusk, Tyler Johnson as well. So any of those names that kind of stick out to you, Brian, as guys you would like the Rangers to go after?
I don't think Reinhart gets to free agency, and I think if he does, the Rangers are out. It's just too much money. Marchessault's really interesting because Cup winner, goal scorer, he'll that kind of guy I think would be a phenomenal complement to a second line of Mika Zibanejad and Chris Kreider. Like that's a really good fit. The problem with Tarasenko and Kane is it's the same reason that I don't buy division championship hats because I've already seen this movie, right? I don't know that that's going to work again. I'm not necessarily against either of those ideas, but it's got to be a low number because they want to come back and try to win. Like you don't need to overpay these guys, right? Tarasenko got 5, I think 5 even, maybe even more than that from Ottawa at the time, right? Kane got that 2 point something on a prorated deal. So if they want to come back, that's great. I'm not opposed to it, although you kind of it feels like you just need to do something different, right? Like your hands are kind of tied because of the contracts that you have. Like I just feel as though a retread, like a guy who's been there before, like it doesn't get you excited. I don't know how else I really can put that, right? So like when you see Patrick Kane again in a Rangers jersey, like you're excited for 2.5 minutes and you're like, oh, this guy didn't win here. Mm-hmm. Tarasenko is not who he was 5 years ago. Even in New York, I mean, he played fine, but it wasn't this transformational trade by any means. So I like a guy like Marchessault. Tyler Toffoli is probably a wet dream. Like that's probably not going to happen because it's going to be too much money. But boy, he'd be a really good fit for what they're trying to do, which is get a little bit more physical in their top 6. I've always liked him as a player. I hated when he went to New Jersey. That would be interesting. Again, it all comes down to money. Now, if they find $8 million in a couple of weeks, then things open up, right? So we'll see. But I of that list of those names, I would love a Marchessault. I would love a guy like a Toffoli if that's that kind of build. I don't really know about it. A Tyler Johnson at this point, I feel like that doesn't move me.
Is there anyone on this list that's not?
DeBrusk's interesting. DeBrusk would be interesting as well.
Is there anyone that's not on this list that you could think of?
I haven't looked that deeply into it yet. I need to kind of see who's actually hits free agency because I think a lot of these guys, you're going to get that. We're going to sign a deal before it gets there. I mean, the perfect look, Jake Gensel available. I mean, apparently Carolina's trading his rights. Again, if you can find $8 million, that takes your 11.3 to 19.3. And now you're like, well, I got some money to burn. And that may change the approach that you take, even though here's the fair question too. Why I think Marchessault might be a good fit because he won't be too long-term. To be fair, Offman's going to play at some point for this team. I don't think he's a first-line player. I never did. I hope to be wrong. We'll see if I am. Gabe Perreault is going to play at some point. The risk that you run is if you go too long with some of these guys, you start blocking internally the guys that you have coming up, which I understand you're pushing and pulling two different things, but they're going to be good enough to play sooner than later. And in this league, if you can get production from an entry-level contract, that opens up doors of what you can do with the rest of that money. So I would be hesitant. I mean, I would love Jake Gensel, but I'd be hesitant to give him like a 7-year deal. And he might want that. At his age, he might want that security. So that may not happen. From that list, Marchessault, Toffoli, DeBrusk would be the 3 that stick out to me. Pending cost.
I could be wrong, Brian, but did Marchessault start in the Rangers system?
It's kind of. He was like a pro tryout. At that point, he was Jonathan Audie Marchessault. We called him Jam, and Torts loved Jam at the time, right? But it's one of those things where he was never going to become what he became here, right? Rangers fans they just like jerk themselves about JT Miller. JT Miller. They gave away JT Miller. JT Miller didn't work out in New York. He was traded again by Tampa Bay. So, like, he was never going to be that guy here. Like, you can say, oh, look what happened. Okay. At the time, that trade made sense.
Joe says, how about Brett Pesce?
I wouldn't hate Brett Pesce. I wouldn't hate that at all. I think that, again, I don't want to get ahead of what I think is the next segment, so I'll hold that back.
Brady, any of these names or any defensemen that we've already mentioned that you kind of think would be good but realistic moves for the Rangers to get?
I agree that Marchessault, I think if they were to get him, I think that would be a great fit for the Rangers. Obviously, as you guys mentioned, Stanley Cup last year, Conn Smythe as well. I mean, Vegas had a bit of a down year this year, but overall, I think He's kind of been a pretty underrated player, honestly, throughout a lot of his career. I agree that I don't think Reinhart gets the free agency, but if somehow the Rangers were to, grab him hypothetically, I think he'd obviously be a great fit for them as well. And yeah, I pretty much honestly agree with Brian on just about everything that you said.
That just means you chose to be right today. That's all.
Toffoli, great fit too, I think. And he brings a little bit more of a physical aspect to it. And then, Tarasenko, Kane, not quite, I guess, what they were, although Patrick Kane did have a pretty good year again with Detroit now. And, Detroit's kind of on the rise again. And Tarasenko, he did okay for Florida this year, kind of went quiet at points, especially in the playoffs until the end, I guess. But, yeah, I mean, for the most part, I think this pretty much the list we compiled here. I think a lot of them would be good fits. Some, of course, more than others. But, yeah, I think the Rangers find themselves in a decent spot here to kind of get better on that wing.
Hey, man, I'm just saying, if you're looking for a guy that's a playoff performer, you can't do much better than the reigning Conn Smythe winner. So that would be interesting for sure.
I mean, he brings – people talk about how you need cup winners on the team to win a cup. If things go the way I think they might go in the offseason, I think other than Jonathan Quick, nobody else will have won a cup on their roster. He fills that need. Good player. He's going to score goals, which, again, all this talk about you needed more defense, he lost each game by 1 goal. So It works both ways.
Next question. This is kind of a two-parter because we can say what we want all we want, but realistically, that's not how it's going to go. So from everything I kind of already know what you want them to do because I watched your show last night. But just for those that haven't seen it, you can kind of recap it. And then I kind of want you to, based on just everything, it's tough to always predict, but what do you think you want them to do and versus what you think they're actually going to do?
You a South Park guy?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay. Do you remember the Canada episode where they put these guys on a piece of ice and they float them away?
Yeah.
That with Jacob Trouba. If you can't afford a rocket, that with Jacob Trouba. So, look, he said he had an ankle problem. Okay. I'm not a doctor. I don't play one on TV, but fixing your ankle doesn't screw your brain up. And just the mental lapses. I mean, my God, the stupid things I saw that guy do this year blow my mind. Okay. I can't even forget. First of all, the one thing the guy does well now, that's all he tries to do, and he does it terribly. All he wants to do is go knock somebody out. Okay. He launches himself like a dart into the boards. If you're a wrestling fan, it was like Rey Mysterio at Nitro in 1996 when Kevin Nash threw him like a dart into the side of a trailer. He did it to himself. Okay. Game 6. This was the clincher, right? There's 2 guys coming at him. He goes to the one that doesn't have the puck, leaving the guy with the puck a free ride right towards the goaltender. By the way, he misses the hit on the guy doesn't have the puck, which is interference, by the way. You probably get a penalty. Now it's 2 on the goalie. Puck's in your net. You never recover. I'm done. Like, I'm done. If they do nothing else this offseason, you got to get rid of Jacob Trouba. And I think that there is a way. As I mentioned before, if they get that second buyout window open, then that gives them 2 ways to get out of that contract, either with a trade or with a buyout post June 1st. You're going to say, who the hell is going to trade for Jacob Trouba? Did you know the Utah, whatever they're called, have no NHL defenseman signed, and they're $20 million below the cap floor? Not the ceiling, the floor. Okay? So, I don't know, Ryan Smith. You got this new hockey team in a building not really meant for hockey. Maybe you want the Mark Messier Award winner, captain of an original 6 team, right? Maybe you want to put him on your blue line for 2 years. Give yourself a franchise face. Just throwing shit out there, right? So there is a road to trading him if he will allow himself to be traded, okay? The problem that I have with the people who say, well, just retain 50% and see what you can do. The buyout and the trade at 50% are the same exact thing. It's a $4 million cap at the next 2 years. The buyout adds 2 more years at $2 million. Okay, it is what it is. Like, I'm fine with that. The cap will be higher that way, and we're going to be okay. And you'll get some production from ELCs, which will offset the $2 million. So I think you have to find a way to get Jacob Trouba off your roster. I don't care how you do it. I need you to do it. Larry Brooks said he doesn't think they run it back, right? That there's going to be some major change. Look, you want to change the look of your team? Get rid of your captain. They've done it before. Ryan Callahan was traded. Ryan McDonough was traded. There is a history of trading captains with this team, right? I also think they should find a way out of Barclay Goodrow. Same exact situation. Look, nice player, 3.6 for a fourth liner, can't do it. Trouba, $8 million, third pair, can't do it. You need that money. So those are two players I would look to move on from in some which way. It could be a trade and it could be a buyout. I don't know that they'd buy out Goodrow. It's doable, but it's a little more annoying. If my option is I have to, if I can't trade him 50%, I'm going to buy him out because it's the same net result. Mm-hmm. What do I think they do? I feel as though based on what Drury said in press conference today, they're going to do something, right? I mean, he pretty much said, like, we're going to try to make Kakko better. Like, I'm just paraphrasing. That's fine. He didn't seem committal to Jacob Trouba, and he said everything's on the table right now. I don't think they're going to trade Panarin because that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, unless you say this is a massive sell high, but I don't think that you could fix it for next year, and they're trying to win now. I don't think Chris Kreider ever gets traded because his numbers go into the roster, to the rafters. They're not going to do it. He scored 39 goals last year, right? And I think Mika's unmovable. So who else can you're not going to trade Adam Fox. So I think the writing is on the wall that they're going to at least attempt to get Trouba off the team. And they have two ways to do it. I think that that's a very real possibility. It would not surprise me if Kakko's back. It wouldn't surprise me if Kakko's traded, but it's not going to be a fire sale. I think they use him for an NHL player kind of like him that might need a different scenery, change of scenery. Again, I don't want to see Lindgren go long. I do fear them going long on Lindgren. I can see it happening because he's such a heart and soul guy. For me, I think one of the easiest things to do is just swap your first and second lines and actually slot them correctly. Because why is Mika's advantage as line to first line? Why? Because he's the highest paid center? Well, Panarin's highest paid player. So if your first line is Trocheck, Lafreniere, and Panarin, your second line is Mika, Kreider, and fill in the blank, all of a sudden that fill in the blank's a lot easier to do because now you're not looking for a first line right winger. You're looking for a middle six right winger or a second line right winger. And more guys can fit that. Look, Marchessault is a second line winger. Great. First line winger? I know it's semantics, but I think it matters. I think it matters psychologically, right? So I would make that change and then see where it goes. They can work with the bottom six with the pieces that they have. You're going to need a defenseman or two. I think they're going to be aggressive, but I don't think they're going to give anything away.
Brady, would you take Jacob Trouba on the New York Islanders?
No, we already have Scott Mayfield. I don't want Jacob Trouba.
What's his contract?
It's basically the same thing, but worse.
What's his contract?
I know they signed him last offseason. It was 7 years, which I've never been a Scott Mayfield fan.
Oh, God.
So I was not a fan of that. And then I had to witness the Stadium Series live and pretty much the season.
Oh, yeah, I was there. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. Oh, no. Oh, Scott. Oh, God. Scott Mayfield signed forever. Oh, God. He signed for Oh, God. I'm sorry. Not really, but I'm sorry.
Yeah, no. He's basically Trouba, though, but slower. So
he was slower.
He was the guy who took that penalty, right? That lost him the game.
Yeah, I think he took like another one earlier in that game too. Yeah, no.
Man, what a choke that was!
Listen. I don't care regular season hockey. That was fun, right? That was cool to be there because Brady, you were there. It was all Rangers fans, right? Can we admit that?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay, so call it 80%, 85%. So to have the goal song in that environment was awesome. Like that's. I know you guys do the yes you stole from Daniel Bryan. That's fine. I'm sure you enjoyed that too. But like all those people doing the goal, that was the best. I thoroughly enjoyed that.
No, yeah, like the outdoor atmosphere. I mean, I wish I heard a little bit less, but no, yeah. Overall, it was a fun experience. I wish the game if we're gonna lose, not like that.
Can I ask you just an Islander fan question?
Yeah,
it is my belief, right? That jersey they wore, which I'm not a fan of, I didn't really like it, but if you're an Islander fan and you have that jersey, you kind of need to burn it because they only wore it I think they only really wore it for that game. And I think to me, It's the same reason why I don't believe in division championships and conference championship shirts if you don't win a cup, because who the hell cares? You're going to want to wear it again. To me, from the Islander fan perspective, that is a constant reminder of that national TV come from that blowed game against the team you hate the most in the world.
Yeah,
So,
no, I agree.
Okay.
I actually have a funny story about that too. I bought a Bo Horvat one leading up to that game.
Yeah.
And I don't know what I did, but I accidentally got like a adult small or extra small, so it didn't fit over my layers. So I didn't end up wearing that one. I wore like the fisherman, but I ended up returning the Horvat one, and I haven't even bothered to get like the right size or whatever.
You know what? Fortunate outcome.
Yeah, I'll just get like the home or away jersey at this point.
Yeah, it's fine, guys. I got one that can top anything you guys could possibly have. I am the proud owner. It wasn't my choice to buy it. My dad gave it to me. I'm the proud owner of a Super Bowl 51 Matt Ryan jersey that I have not worn in 7.5 years or whatever it's been. So, but yeah. Joe says, you mentioned Utah as a trade partner. Do you think Lawson Krause could be a fit here?
So here's the thing. I would like to trade Jacob Trouba to the Utah, whatever they're called, for absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
I don't. Fans need to come to the realization that cap space is a value. I don't need anything back. I need you to go away. That's all I need you to do, right? The funny part about Utah / Coyotes is they got Shane Gostisbehere for nothing from the Flyers with a 3rd round pick, and then traded him for a 2nd. That's fantastic asset management, right? Again, take him. Jacob Trouba for nothing is a wonderful headline in my life. I'm good. I don't need anything. I need nothing. And because they're under the floor, I mean, literally, guys, they have 11 people signed next year. 11. No defensemen, right? They literally have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9 skaters and 2 goalies signed. That's it. They're still paying Shea Weber, by the way. Long time Utah, whatever they're called. Right? Yeah. 5 defensemen. Dursey, Moser, and Valimaki are RFA with Arbrights, and Brown and Dermott are UFA. So Lawson Kruse is signed, 26 years old, $4.3 million. I don't want him. Mm-hmm. Although, I guess I'll say this. If it came down to it, right? If they say, hey, we'll give you Lawson Kruse for Jacob Trouba 50% retained, the money's exactly the same, but I get Lawson Kruse. Mm-hmm. Okay, I'll deal.
Last question before we move on to the segment, because as always, I expected, when we have Brian talking Rangers time estimates go out the window, you might as well just add 50 to 75% on whatever the estimate is, and
I
even
told
then,
you that. Yes.
But last Rangers question. So you and I have talked about this Rangers contention window a lot. I think a lot of your fan base, it's not just Rangers fans, but I noticed a lot from them, heavily overestimate, how long contention windows are. You have teams like, and I'll bring up an example. Now, other than the fact they have an incredible goalie, I think a team that the current Rangers, just skater-wise, remind me a lot of are the Pittsburgh Penguins from about 5 years ago, because their best players, they still had superstar talent, but guys like Crosby, Malkin, and Letang, who were the key guys, getting up there. And when you look at the Rangers, their best forwards, Panarin, Zibanejad, Kreider, and their best center, Vincent Trocheck, all in their early 30s or approaching mid-30s. So they're only going to stagnate and then decline from here on. Now, it's great to have that elite goalie. That really helps. But we've shown from this season, it's often not enough by itself to win it, to where they need to get more guys in around these star guys now, because they're not going to be the same guys even a year or two from now. So, Brian, in your opinion, with how fast this core is aging, how long do you think this window is left? Because I know you said if they don't make any changes now, it's already done.
Yes.
But if they do make those changes, how long do you think they have?
I think you can extend it 2 more years. Because I think that, and again, then you're at an inflection point, right? Because Panarin's contract's over. Kreider's contract, I think, is also over the year after. The problem that I think you're going to run into is Mika's contract, which was a horrible decision the day it was signed, right? So Kreider's got 3 years, Panarin's got 2. Trocheck has a no move clause. Now, he signed for 5 more years. It's after next year the no move becomes a no trade. But he's got some runway, right? I'm more concerned about Mika than I am about Trocheck, and their contracts are relatively close in time without a roster change is done right now. Because if you bring back this exact roster next year, you're going to get the same exact outcome. Be a very good regular season team, might win their division, might not, probably win a first round. They probably lose in round 2, or they luck out of it, they'll lose in round 3. Like that's what they are at this point. Like you need to make a change. It is not. I gave you the analogy, the Eminem lyric with the Penguins of when you run it to admit when it's end. They're not at their end. They're at their end if they stay stagnant, right? I mean, again, age is up there, but that just adds fuel to the fire. Why the hell weren't you more aggressive now? Career year Panarin, career year Kreider for the most part. Like, go with it. Right now, they're done right now. If they don't make a change, they're done right now. If they're paying 10% of their cap to Jacob Trouba to suck, they're done right now. Mm-hmm. They can't afford to not have that money, right? So you don't have a ton of talent coming because you've been moving your picks, which is perfectly fine, by the way, but you have to go with it, right? So, like, if you fast forward, if you go after this season, you go to the 25-26 season, you start to think about, frankly, depending where you are, trading Panarin to a team that can contend, and you start, and again, Crosby didn't say, and trade me for the rebuild. It hasn't ever happened, right? Mm-hmm. But those are the conversations you start having about it, because, like, well, where's it going to go? They have, and again, if Igor's making 12, then that's, cap better go up quite a bit to offset that. You're always going to be in the mix when you have that kind of goaltender, and I think Adam Fox is a top 3, worst case top 5 defenseman in the league. So you're always going to have that core, that foundation to it. It's what you do around it. When those contracts for Panarin and Kreider come up, they're the Rangers. They'll go buy somebody. That's what they do, right? Mm-hmm. It's that Zibanejad deal that just scares the absolute hell out of me. That's why I wanted Jack Eichel. All I wanted was Jack Eichel. How many times to talk about it? I just want Jack Eichel. Makes sense. Just go get Jack Eichel. No? Okay, cool.
We talked about it for 3 years.
It just didn't make it made no sense. It was perfect. It was perfect. I don't care what Buffalo said. Again, same thing. Gonna overpay? Overpay. I don't care. You're talking about draft picks right now. They're not going to play for 5 years. We could all be dead. Who the hell cares? This is your moment. And we're wasting it. You know what they kind of are right now? It's actually, you're going to like this, Noah. You know what my analogy was for Jacob Trouba?
Yeah.
Jacob Trouba is the flag in football. Because every time something happens in the NFL, like a good pass play or something crazy, your eyes, and you'll notice it when I'm going to bring it to you, your eyes always go to the part of the screen that says flag or no flag. Like, okay, was it a good play? Awesome, great. When a goal is scored on the Rangers, your eyes immediately look around to see if there's a guy with a big number 8 on his back. And more times than not, there is. He is the flag. Get rid of the flag. And things open up. Give the Rangers $20 million in cap space. Guess what? Okay. Now let's get aggressive.
Mm-hmm. Well, Brian, that was great Rangers talk, but we're going to move on to our final segment here. Kind of probably have to go a little faster than I'd like, but I would be remiss to not have you on and at least talk a little bit about the Stanley Cup Finals. Now, I know, to put it kindly, you as a Rangers fan could not give 2 hoots about this Stanley Cup Finals, but it still is, the most important round of the season. So wanted to get some of your thoughts on it. So Edmonton trying to become, like I said earlier, the first Canadian team to win the Stanley Cup since 1993. I spelled Canadian like Montreal Canadiens because I was thinking of Montreal. Whatever. Florida still looking to win their first Stanley Cup. Losses to Detroit and Vegas, like I said earlier, both with major cup droughts. So, Brian, I'll start with you on this one as a guy who's just watched a team play a whole series against Florida. I think Florida's an amazing team. I think they're incredibly well coached. Wasn't sure about the Paul Maurice hire at first, but I got to give credit. He, back-to-back Stanley Cup Finals for a team like Florida. Superstar talent. Matthew Tkachuk is amazing. Sam Reinhart is that second offensive option. You got Barkov as well. That's Barkov. Barkov's amazing. Great top 3 for them to have. Bobrovsky, it's still tough for me for Bobrovsky, right? Because I always remember how he was earlier in his career in the playoffs and how many collapses he had. The last 2 years, he's been really, really good. Except for the finals last year was terrible. But granted, the whole defense was terrible. So it's kind of like he's both a question mark, but also an X factor as well. I don't know what to think of him. What are your expectations for these two teams in this finals?
So you and I both thought Dallas would kind of have an easy road with Edmonton.
Yes.
I will say this: between the Rangers and Dallas, I think Dallas has to be more disappointed with losing, because I think that they're, there's a sea change there. I think more with the Rangers. Florida's good. I mean, that's like I said. I mean, if you watch that series, I mean, they really took it to the Rangers. I mean, if you go back and look at the stat, which is called Corsi 4, which is obviously total shot attempts taken, the top 4 teams were Carolina, Edmonton, Dallas, and Florida. So if not for a couple coin flip games in the second round, those 4 teams will be the final 4. It's a valuable statistic. If defense wins championships, Florida's got it, because I don't really think a lot of Edmonton's defense. I love Evan Bouchard. That was a great pick for them. I think Darnell Nurse stinks. I think he's a bet worse contract than Jacob Trouba. I am not a Stuart Skinner person. Bobrovsky's a great example of you can pay the goalie and still win. The reason that I would root for Edmonton is simply because the last time the Canadian team won, the Rangers won the next year. And since we're talking about things that don't matter, we've been doing this for 4 months now. Hey, there was an earthquake in New York. Rangers win the cup. I'm going to go ahead and draw that correlation just because it makes me feel better. If I got to make a pick, though, everything you said about Florida is accurate, and it doesn't even give them enough credit. Like, that's a very good team. And the Tkachuk trade, which at the time I thought they gave up a lot, really just changed the way they play. Like, they've kind of taken on his personality, which is a credit to him. Again, I look at them and I think, can Connor McDavid go through that defense? I don't know. I mean, he'll get his points. So will Draisaitl. I just think Florida's going to be able to score on them, and I think that's going to be the difference. Is I think Florida's going to be able to score a little bit more. I trust Florida's defense a little bit more. I don't plan to watch it because I don't care and it pisses me off. But I personally would think if Florida wins the series, I think it probably goes 7. I don't like to pick the road team to win because I'm not going to say 6. It might just be 6 because I said that. But I think this is Florida's to lose.
I'm glad you mentioned the Tkachuk-Huberdeau trade, because that was one when, first of all, massive blockbuster trade. But when that one came out, I was kind of on the fence about it. I seem to remember you were one of the only ones I ever saw that thought Florida won the trade. And it looks like that has been the case. I saw a lot of people saying Calgary won, and I was kind of 50-50. I kind of thought it was a win for both sides. Looking in hindsight, it hasn't really worked for Huberdeau in Calgary, but Tkachuk in Florida, man, like you said, I've always loved Tkachuk. Like, I know he's a douchebag, but he's just such a great player. And like you said, he has that infectious energy that I think has gone to the rest of the team, to where they went from that team that, yes, they won the President's Trophy, but then, playoff disappointment against Lightning, back-to-back Stanley Cup finals. Now, I know they lost last season, but I think with that one, they were underdogs. Like, they were massive underdogs. And I wanted them to win, but I kind of knew it probably wasn't going to happen. This one, I think they're favorites because I think overall they're a better team. Now, yes, Edmonton has the superstar firepower, but I think they have flaws on their team that I don't see with Florida. I think Florida has a goaltending advantage. They have a massive defensive advantage. I love Evan Bouchard like you, but let's be honest, he's an offensive defenseman. They don't really have that lockdown defensive guy because you got to have both to balance out. I don't think they have that. Stuart Skinner, like you said, he was great the last 2 games, but he's not like a guy that I think you can rely on to kind of steal games like that consistently, especially against an offense like this. They're great at limiting shots. I mean, they made the Rangers' life very difficult. And like you said, they put shots on the net at an elite rate as well. I think it will be competitive. I think 6 to 7 games is fair. I probably will go Florida, though. Brady, thoughts on this series and who you think is going to win it?
Yeah, I think you guys both kind of nailed it. I think Florida is just one of the most well-rounded teams really in hockey right now. And while, we talked about Edmonton, their goalie situation, not the best. Skinner has his games, but he also has games where he's all right. And then he has games where he's just like borderline awful. And their defense, not great. Bouchard, more of an offensive defenseman. Darnell Nurse, just not very good. Also, has had some unlucky bounces too. But yeah, their defense isn't great. It's really their offense, and even then, they're a fairly top-heavy team. I mean, of course, their whole forward core is pretty solid, but it's heavily still reliant on McDavid and Draisaitl and those guys. And I think honestly, special teams is going to play a big role in this series because we all know how good McDavid and Draisaitl, Hyman are on their power play, but also Florida. It wasn't crazy in the Rangers series and throughout. They've gone up against some tough teams, but they've gotten some big goals on it. And I mean, we saw what Sam Reinhart did in the regular season, and just overall, I think I'm favoring Florida too. And I think if Edmonton is going to win this, they have to convert on their power play and break through the defense and Bobrovsky. Otherwise, I feel like Florida is just their goaltending. Bobrovsky, sure, he has his off games, but this postseason he's been amazing. Their defensive core is great, and I mean you could argue obviously with the superstar power the Oilers have that they're maybe have the edge offensively, but Florida doesn't quite have McDavid per se, but Tkachuk, Barkov, Verhaeghe, Reinhart, those guys can pretty much match them. Edmonton, that is, goal for goal. And, I wish my Islanders would do this. I've been saying this for years because they bring the physicality, obviously, but I love Florida's game with, and Carolina, of course, does it too, with just getting shots on net as well, because it's hockey and, you never know what can happen. Fool a goalie, get a rebound, something like that. And, of course, it helps when you have the talent to do it as well. That being said, I agree with you, Brian. I never like to pick the road team, but I am going to say Florida in 6. I think it's still going to be a pretty tight, contested series, but I think Florida does have the edge in most spots, so I think they get it done.
And last but not least, I want all of you guys to give me Conn Smythe winners. So if you think it's Florida winning, you could pick a Florida player, or potentially could a guy like Connor McDavid be, I believe, only the 3rd player ever to win it on a losing team. Brady, I'll start with you on this one.
Well, I have the guy that I want to win. I'm not sure if he's going to. I almost feel like it's kind of like a Super Bowl MVP. I feel like, there's some years where there's guys that might deserve it that don't win it. But I think he's not maybe the most offensive guy, but he absolutely gets it done. And he's been outstanding, as we all know, defensively, back checking and just in the defensive zone as well as a forward too, winning, almost every year. And that's Alexander Barkov. He's definitely the guy that I want to see win. And I think he very much could if he's able to. Listen, he's not going to shut down McDavid and Draisaitl and those guys, but if he can, limit them in a big enough way to, because if he and those guys are able to do that, then this series could maybe somewhat surprisingly be even a little bit shorter than we all kind of think. But I just think he's one of the more underrated players in the league, of course, and he's one of the best players when it comes to the full 200-foot game. I feel like Florida, there's just so many players to pick and choose from just because there's such a well-structured team in basically every aspect. But that's my pick. I think he definitely, deserves it. Obviously, this series, someone else obviously could end up taking it. There's so many guys to pick from, but I just love Sasha Barkov's game, so I'm going to give it to him.
I think what's interesting, right, is I think if it's Florida, like you can make a legitimate case for a handful of guys, right? Like you can say, hey, Barkov did this and Reinhart did that and Bobrovsky did this and Tkachuk did that. Like there's not really one leader in the clubhouse for me, right? So I think McDavid can win it in a losing effort because if he ends up taking over the series, just missing it, right? Like if it goes 7 and they lose in Florida, but McDavid has 10 goals in the series, like that sort of thing can be a factor. So in my opinion, you can see McDavid win with the Panthers Cup. I think if Edmonton wins, it's absolutely Connor McDavid. It would be really interesting that the losing player wins. it's just I think it's tough to pick a Panther, right? Because you can make the case for so many guys, and that to me is a testament to the way they're put together. Is they don't really rely on one person, and that's why they're where they are, and the Rangers aren't. The Rangers were a power play and a goaltender. Florida's just a machine. So if you have to ask me right now, not even knowing the winner, I'd put some shekels on Connor McDavid. Just take a shot with it, and I think that that's a way to play the series without really having to play the series. You may not care who you wins.
I hear what you guys are saying, and I honestly haven't decided. I'm kind of stuck between two guys. So I could see McDavid doing it. He's one guy that I have. The other guy, I think it is tough with Florida. I'm not going to go with Bobrovsky because even though I think he's been big in the big moments, he doesn't overall have the flashy stats that a guy like a Jonathan Quick would when he won the Conn Smythe. Sam Reinhart, Barkov, and Kachuk, I think, are kind of safe picks. I think my kind of dark horse for this would be Carter Verhaeghe because he's tied for second for points on their team, and he's also their leading goal scorer. He didn't score. I don't think he scored any points the last two games of the conference finals, but I think he's kind of an underrated guy. But, I mean, being perfectly honest, I could see McDavid winning it. At the same time, he had similar stats. A couple playoffs ago, I know they didn't make the Cup finals, but, I mean, the point totals 31 and 16 versus 33 and 18 is basically identical, and he didn't win it then. So he could win it. I don't know if he will, but just because I think his numbers are so unbelievably good, and he's going to, potentially reach at least 40, 45 points in this series, I probably will go McDavid, even though I expect them to lose. But I just think his numbers are so good. Granted, the last time it happened was, I believe, J.S. Giguère, and he was a goaltender, so it might be a little tougher for him as a forward, but who knows? But regardless, we'll see what happens. Knowing how our predictions usually go, that means Edmonton is probably going to win this series in 5 games because, I mean, that's just how it usually goes. Yeah. But, that's all I got for tonight. Brian, I want to thank you for coming on, man. Good talking about the Rangers. Can't say I'm too sad they lost, but it was as a neutral, it was a good series. And the window, we'll see what happens in the offseason for them. But, any kind of closing thoughts here before we wrap it up for the night?
Well, first of all, if you're a Rangers fan and you like Rangers content, hi, I'm Brian. I run BlueTruth, a member of the Sportsbox Network. Find me. My page is up to 11,000 followers. I'm not sure how the hell that happened, but I'll take it and run. It's just a big off season. I mean, it is, because this can go really good or really bad. And I think that we're entering the part of the season, guys, where every single time you get a Twitter alert, like your heart kind of goes up a little bit like this, because anything can happen. It could be a good trade. It could be a bad trade. It could be a signing. It could be a litany of different things, right? I'm very mad that we have a draft pick, because I don't really care, because I could have used that pick to help my team win now, but now I got to pick a guy at 30 who I won't see for 4 years of it all. Just the way I look at things. You guys do a wonderful job with your hockey coverage. I do try to peek in as much as I possibly can. You guys do a real good job with that. So hopefully you continue that. Obviously, I hate both of your teams more than you know. My son has already been trained to hate both of your teams, but that's okay. That's the beauty of sport.
Brian, I will say positive for you. You will feel a little better in a few weeks when the Pens trade 3 firsts to the Rangers for Jacob Trouba with no salary retained. Because that's the type of player they would love, man. They'd love that contract and everything. But Dimitri says, awesome show and thoughts. Thank you for tuning in, Dimitri. And Tom says, Brady, I'll take 2 out of 3 with you, man. Go Big Blue. Mets are past finished. Yeah.
And then also to your point about notifications, I mean, for my team, I got to wait till like late August to see our signings and stuff like that, to see us sign like some fourth liner and
let me ask you a question.
Defenseman that doesn't play.
Let me ask you a question. Where are you on Lou right now?
I'm not really a fan. Every once in a while he does something though to kind of like bring me back and be like, all right, but like, I don't know. He doesn't really have like urgency, because we were never really a win now team, and of course we kind of surpassed expectations and reached the conference finals back-to-back seasons, but like he never really has a direction, it seems. And even if he might think he does, he doesn't really seem to like follow that very clearly at all. Obviously, I'm never one to root for a tank per se or anything like that, but if you're gonna rebuild or something, just like do it. Like if we are at that point, just like do it. If we want to try to win, do that. Like I understand there's factors with salary cap and all that, but like he from year to year and even less than that, it seems like month to month, day to day, he seems to change his mind. I don't hate him. I think he's done a lot of good things, but at the same time, some questionable moves. The Devon Tays trade still angers me, especially since we still have Scott Mayfield for like 6 more years. And there were plenty others. And like I said, there's once in a while he does some good things, but overall not really a fan, just because he doesn't really have like a decisive direction on this team.
I don't know if this is going to show, but I had made a meme, which I'm known to do on occasion, back in 2019, and I had was things that are no longer useful. There was a Walkman, a VCR, some floppy disk, and Lou Lamoriello.
Marty Birder.
Lou Lamoriello has built a career off of 1 draft pick, and God bless him. Okay, I mean that was a really good draft pick, best goalie of all time. But I don't know. I as objectively as I possibly can be, like I think the Islanders are in the pit of death. Like I just don't know how you get out of it. Bad contracts that you can't get out of. There's not a lot of things that would get me excited about their future. I think Sorokin is phenomenal. Like phenomenal. I just don't look at them and I say, like, I think Matt Barzal's a nice player. I don't like Bo Horvat for that length of time. I think that was a desperation move because I think they have trouble signing free agents. It's just tough. Like they don't have a lot of direction. I think you said that, and they don't have a lot of direction. I think that's usually like, and Noah, you know this. I am a tank guy. Like if you're not going to win, lose. Get as high a draft pick as possible. Who the hell cares, right? Like you can there's successful seasons and productive seasons. Sharks had a great productive year. That's a great productive year for the Sharks. Successful, Rangers weren't successful. One team's successful. We'll find out in a week and a half, right? So, yeah, it's tough. I mean, I'm not upset about it by any means, but that's tough.
2 final thoughts, Brian. I got some bones to pick with you, man. You put in a decent shift tonight, like a 4th liner, but you let me down a little bit. Number one, first of all, you said you'd have your 2nd round champion shirt on, and you don't have it, so kind of let me down a bit with that.
I mean, that's something to really be proud of. Only 4 teams win a 2nd round.
Exactly. And number 2, with some of these things you've said in the past few weeks about my lovely co-host predictions regarding the Rangers, I expected a bit more combativeness.
He said it like, well, I was biased. That's why. I mean, obviously you picked against the Rangers because, to be fair, I also picked against the Rangers against Carolina. So I mean, it's what it is. I think Brady. I think you picked against. Did you pick Washington too?
Oh no. So I'm not that biased.
All right, that's fair. It's all right. Listen, I mean, it's I every time that Noah would send me the predictions, I'm like, who is this Brady character, and why do I need to punch him in the face?
Yeah, sorry about that.
Man, Brian, I know you're a big wrestling guy. I was expecting a bit more tables, ladders, chairs. Instead, it was all nicety. Need some more combativeness next time, man.
No, the guy's an Islanders fan. What can I do to him?
That's true. Yeah. He's already dead inside.
How can I possibly make this worse, right? Like, it just, I can't. It's all right.
And he's a Mets fan. I
appreciate you not. Yeah.
Yeah, Mets. Huh?
At least he's not a Jets fan. He is a Giants fan. So he has some success there to fall back on. But
yeah, a while ago.
Well, hey, you're a New York sports fan. What was that stat? 100 combined seasons without a championship?
You know why that's the dumbest stat in the world?
It is. But
because half those teams hate each other. So who the hell cares?
Yeah, like I'm not.
It is the dumbest thing. They have like 112 teams in New York. Who cares? Like,
Yeah,
the
like the
things that
Rangers
people
were
make
the
up.
closest team, and I'm not rooting for them to do it. Like I
Yeah,
feel like
oh,
people.
guess what? I mean, if the Islanders win the cup next year, that dies. Okay, keep it going forever. What the hell do I care? Like, what's
Yeah,
that?
Brady, the only 2 years you need to be focused on are 1983 and 1986. That's all you need.
You know, it's crazy, and I'm the first person to say this. Had the Islanders gotten past Tampa Bay and gotten Montreal, they win a Stanley Cup.
yep.
There is no doubt in my mind, and I was very nervous.
1-0 shorthanded goal breakaway.
Very nervous. If you remember, I had a Tampa Bay Lightning logo as my temporary profile picture. I said, the enemy is my friend.
That was the most deplorable.
I couldn't handle it. Like, that was not going to go good for me.
Brian, you've done a lot of degenerate things. Like, now that you remind me, that's the most petty degenerate thing you've ever done. But I loved it. I loved it, man. It was great.
What choice did I have?
Garth and I live covered that game, actually, now that on Sweet Tea. And as soon as they scored the goal, I'm like, that's the most Islanders game. Islanders way to lose a Game 7 game where you basically have a Stanley Cup on the line. Because Montreal was the biggest overachievers. Yeah. That terrible playoff format they had to play the choking Leafs around. I mean, it's the easiest road ever. But, couldn't get it done. And it's okay, Brady. I'm right there in the pits of misery with you at least. But,
I'm sorry, Noah. How many cups have you seen your team win?
Hey, I'm focused on the now.
Yeah.
Not really. I have to watch back the highlights every couple of weeks to make myself feel better.
Yeah, I have to watch back highlights in non-HD.
VHS, black and white.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah, but
I'll tell you this. You do run the risk. It can happen. You do run the risk of your hockey fan base becoming my football fan base.
Hey, it's not 1996, man. It's pretty recent. I still remember it pretty well.
No. It's recent now.
Yeah.
96 was recent too, up until it wasn't.
Brian, that's what. We just need to two more lottery lucky wins. Get 2 first-round picks like we had with. Just need, first it was Lemieux and Yager. There's Crosby and Malkin. Now we need whoever it is. I don't know who it's going to be. It can happen. Especially because they're probably about to decline, fall off the cliff.
They just keep putting Band-Aids on gunshot wounds. I don't know why. Just let it go.
Don't remind me. But you got to. I'm the only Penguins fan, like out of 58 million, I'm probably one of 12 that's been calling this for about 3 years.
You are nothing if not consistent, and I respect the hell out of that because I like to think I am too.
Yeah. But this was a ridiculously unrelated tangent. The show should have ended about 20 minutes ago, probably. But it was fun. It was fun to do. So, from myself, Noah Dog Dibler, my co-host and buddy Brady Campbell, and my guest and good buddy Brian Attard, it's been another episode of Puckin Around on the Review and Preview Sports Network. Till we see you next time. Enjoy the Stanley Cup Finals. Hopefully your team doesn't give you a heart attack in the offseason, and we'll see you next time. Keep pucking around, everyone.